Good morning. Thank you for joining us today at the audience as well as those online. And I'm very happy here to be moderating this panel for all of you. So we're going to be discussing on our initiatives here. Let's start off with our session on decarbonizing mobility in Western Canada, the 5,000 hydrogen vehicle challenge. And start off with a small introduction from our panelists here. So let's get on with Terri.
Hi there, my name is Terri Johnson. I'm from the Alberta Motor Transport Association, and we represent the commercial carriers in Alberta and many of them across Canada.
Colin?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. We should get the crowd to come in here a little bit. It's a little lonely in here, you know? Colin Armstrong. I am the CEO of HTEC. We're a Vancouver-based hydrogen infrastructure developer and operator. So happy to be here. Looking forward to the discussion.
Arvind?
Morning, Arvind Ramakrishnan with Deloitte, lead the hydrogen file for Deloitte nationally, and I've had the pleasure of working with Terri, HTEC, Edmonton Global here on numerous projects. So happy to be here and share some insights and learnings.
Thank you. And I'm Mohamed, Program Director for Mobility at the Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hub. So before we start off on our discussion, I'll give you do some context setting in general. The 5,000 vehicle challenge was an ecosystem initiative aimed at getting 5,000 vehicles on the road within 5 years. So since then, we started off with a couple workshops, and we heard from the ecosystem that we needed some more initiatives around supply chain mapping, first responder training, mechanic training, ecosystem development around on the standards file stuff, as well as on building partnerships and understanding the total cost of ownership. And since then, we've made some major strides on this, like with the development of the Edmonton Region Hydrogen Supply Chain tool, which is online now, and we do have some of our representatives here who can speak to it. We funded the CSA group on the development of a first responder training program, which is a 3-year project. Hopefully, by the end of next year, we should have some knowledge mobilization tools that's available online, as well as a national standard on first responder responses for hydrogen-related incidents. As well as this June, hopefully we will be having a publication on a gap analysis around the training needs for the sector. And most recently, we also supported AMTA with their mechanic training initiative, getting folks from our ecosystem to go down to Phoenix, Arizona, and work on Nikola's hydrogen vehicles, and now come back here and set up some new courses around that. And the other bigger initiative on our end was the development of the total cost of ownership calculator as part of the Zero Emission Vehicle Awareness Initiative, and it's now available on our website called the 5000hydrogen.ca, which Arvind's team from Deloitte had a pretty big role in developing. And there was one more key thing that we heard from the ecosystem was partnership-based approach on not just funding production stations separately, fueling stations separately, etc., but more like that whole partnership or a consortium type approach, like where from the fleets, the trucks, as well as the fueling stations and the production mechanisms, all funded together to make that chain whole. And that's something that we now worked on, and we recently launched our Western Canada Hydrogen Corridors Initiative, funded by Alberta Innovates, Alberta Eco Trust Foundation, and Emissions Reductions Alberta. We're now developing the business case, looking at emulating the operation of the consortium along 3 priority corridors, the Edmonton to Calgary, Edmonton to Prince George and Prince Rupert, and Edmonton to Fort McMurray. Looking at the operation as well as the cost, the infrastructure, the environmental, social, and economic, financial business case towards moving on these, on mobilizing on these vehicles. And on that front, I'd like to pass it off to Arvind to speak to a little more on the analysis that they've been doing as a part of the initiative on the pilots at scale and the other findings.
Yeah, so what we were trying to look at is pilots at scale across other jurisdictions and where they have been implemented successfully, the learnings, the takeaways, how the consortium was established, and how can we perhaps replicate those here in Canada, and especially here in Western Canada. So HTEC was one among them, which I'll let Colin touch about that. But other than that, we looked into Europe. We looked into Asia and into the California markets. And there are numerous examples and models of those pilots at scale that we researched and compiled together a list of key takeaways and learnings. I can perhaps touch on a few of those key takeaways and what happened. The first and the most critical aspect of those takeaways was an integrated collaborative approach to bring demand side and supply side consortium partners together was an absolutely critical component of those pilots at scale. And there are various examples of this where the consortium was established and brought together to ensure that it was a seamless experience for the fleet operators. The second is an innovative and a commercial business model whereby a leasing type model or a pay-per-use was absolutely critical so that the fleet operators do not have to put the upfront expenditures on the trucks. And it was a really easy adoption process for them to be able to just pay on a pay-per-use basis. And the third element was really around operationalizing strategy and infrastructure planning. So really being very strategic about the routes you want to run the trucks on, where infrastructure is available, and perhaps where future adoption can happen from the trials and learnings. And the last element was regarding information sharing. So democratization of information and data sharing is also one of another critical aspects from the pilots at scale. The TCO tool that Mohamed touched on, I would highly recommend and encourage you all to look at the TCO tool that we have developed. It's absolutely a highly interactive total cost of ownership tool. Users can plug in all sorts of information that they want. It compares against FCEV, battery electric, CNG, diesel. You can plug in the values and it shows you really what are the key levers that must come down to have the total cost of ownership at par with diesel.
Nice. I think we'll move over to Terri now, and maybe you can tell us more about the work you're doing with all the pilots and stuff.
Yeah, so Arvind is correct. That total cost of ownership calculator is something that's very important for you to take a look at, and it will give you those ideas. So that's one thing. One of the questions that Mohamed had asked me to prepare was about fleet's opinions of these new vehicles. And I think that one thing that people don't understand is that there's varying levels of opinions within a fleet. There's the individual that's purchasing the vehicle, and when you take or purchasing the fuel. So when we take a look at the individual that's purchasing the fuel or purchasing the vehicle, the costs are very high still, so they're not competitive with other fuel sources, other alternative fuels. So we're fighting a little bit of an uphill battle here with regards to fuel costs and with regards to vehicle costs. But if we take a look at the opinions of the drivers, so somebody else that's important to take a look at, those drivers are fighting for these trucks. The trucks are silent, they're quiet, they have no vibrations, they have no odors that are coming off them from fuels, and there's a high degree once these fleets are integrated once the vehicles are integrated into the fleets, there's a high degree of competition as to who even gets to drive the vehicles. So that's an important thing to take a look at. We're working on a project that's a zero emission truck test bed in collaboration with Deloitte, and it's integrating a lot of our different projects. So we've got 5 fuel cell vehicles that are operating on the roads. 4 of them are operating in Alberta, and then we've got 1 battery electric vehicle that's operating in the Vancouver, going from Langley to Mount Vernon, doing that cross border. And with these vehicles, we've been able to identify all kinds of project learnings with regards to range. One thing that's very in front of us is that drivers have to be able to drive economically in these vehicles. The same driver that's practiced on a vehicle driving with good fuel standards, acceleration within certain ranges on the vehicle is going to get a higher range, higher fuel efficiency. Another driver doing the exact same route with the exact same vehicle with the exact same trailer might have problems getting returned to base. So there's a lot of learnings that we have to work with within industry, so that industry is aware of how these vehicles can best serve their organizations.
Thank you, Terri. Now I'd like to move over to Colin to learn more about HTEC and their amazing work.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said, we're infrastructure developer, but we actually have a business unit that we call Transportation Solutions, and that does really help the fleets get into using the vehicles. So as AMTA is doing is understanding what their need. I think there's maybe a saying, fleets are a bit fleeting in this world. I think it takes a lot of education for them. So most of them haven't seen any of the hydrogen vehicles. They have to learn about that, and then they have to understand the pros and cons of putting them into their infrastructure. So, and then that is influenced depending on what the infrastructure looks like. So when we sort of plan our infrastructure investments, we have to understand the fleet side of things, and also, actually, to be honest, their customers, and we may want to talk about that a little bit later. A lot of the business models of the fleets is separated out on the fuel supply side of things by their customers. So but you need to figure out where they're going, what their fueling protocol looks like, who does it, what are the people doing whilst it's being fueled. So there's a lot of understanding, and the work you guys are doing helping us hugely trying to understand that. So really, so we can justify the investments in the stations as well as the hydrogen supply side of things. So partnerships is critical. I think one of the stumbling blocks in California was they kind of created a demand ahead of the availability of the hydrogen. So there was not that insight and thought that we need to make sure the hydrogen supply side is going to live up to the demand. Otherwise, you get the price spikes and the ability for doing price spikes. So, and we ran into that problem working with AMTA on the Edmonton trials. There's a lot of hydrogen in Alberta, but it wasn't suitable and packaged for the transportation side of things. So a lot of work and thought had to go into that, and partnerships with the likes of Suncor. And it takes a long time. It takes effort to do it. So as we try and put this 5-year, 5,000 vehicle into context, I think you have to think through those things. I like the 3-2-1 kind of rule. It's 3 years to build fuel supplier of hydrogen, 2 years to build a fueling station, and 1 to get your truck, and you got to have them all come together at the same time. So you really have to think that through quite a bit. So learning a lot in Vancouver in the Canadian context. We're liking this sort of momentum to have One Canada. That helps because our engineers are not typically certified for Alberta. We have a different regulatory body. They have different opinions, different ideas of how to interpret the codes and standards. So it is a lot about working together. I think the more your groups can promote that, the more likely groups like ours are willing to invest and understand the market and be active here. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Colin. Such amazing work that you guys are doing there, and I'm glad to have you today to share that work. So I think I'll move on to to learn more from Deloitte on this part, even with the Corridors project and as well as the TCO project that you guys worked on. Last year, we released that current state assessment report where we kind of identified the priority corridors. And so I just wanted to know, from your side, Arvind, what was the stuff that surprised you from what came out of the corridor mapping, and how does the identification of key routes kind of help de-risk investment as well as deployment strategies in Western Canada?
Yeah, no, so couple of things I'll say there is, one is the work that we did in the initial stage assessment was really to understand heat maps of where the trucks are traveling today, what kind of loads are they hauling, where are they currently refueling, who their shippers are, and how might this evolve over time. So when we looked at all those factors, and some of the data was not readily available, so we had to stitch together from a lot of public sources and a lot of information, then we ultimately landed on priority corridors A and then secondary corridors. So in those priority corridors, we really zeroed in on Edmonton, Calgary. Trials are already happening today, but we realized that is a strategic corridor. That's how infrastructure and projects and pilots should be start thinking about to achieving from the 3 or 4 to start achieving scale. The other one was Edmonton, Fort Mac, Edmonton, Grand Prairie. That's another strategic corridor that had a lot of trucks flowing between both of them today, close to about 25,000 actually Class 7, 8 trucks, but in Edmonton, Calgary today. similar kind of number between Edmonton, Fort Mac. And then the last one was interprovincial, which was really interesting. So going from Edmonton to Prince George, and then from Prince George to Prince Rupert. After Prince George, there was a bit of a drop-off in traffic because rail picks up a little bit of that, but it certainly showed a lot of high-volume traffic. Now, the question there is, what kind of trucks are they driving? What are they hauling? Some of them are hauling wood chips and heavy liquid fuels, north of 110,000 pounds of weight. So some of the OEM offerings today are nowhere eligible for that, but they're also not ready for battery electrification either. So either it has to be a liquid fuel, and for us to get there, there might be stages of development and evolution. So that's how we were beginning to start looking at that report. The second part of that, we were trying to look at the investments and the business case required to make these corridors viable. So maybe start looking at return to base, hub and spoke, and then how do you make these corridors valuable. The one thing that surprised us the most, Mohamed, I'll say, is two things. One is sharing of information is critical, because right now this information in pilots is not held amongst the organizations that have done these pilots. So how do you share this information so that pilots don't have to happen at every stage, and how do you go from pilots to scale? The second thing that not surprised but was interesting is government intervention is required, but required in a very strategic way. And unless you bring demand and supply side consortiums together, including infrastructure project developers, fuel suppliers, that project by itself is not gonna take off.
On that front, like I'm interested to know from Terri and Colin's point, like, could you tell us some about your funders for your pilot projects, as well as HTEC's gateway program too? Like,
yeah, so I guess one of the things, going back to the hydrogen supply, so we've had a network of stations in Vancouver, 5 light-duty ones, and we actually had to tell Toyota and Hyundai to stop bringing cars once we got up to kind of the high 200s. We just simply didn't have the hydrogen supply. So I just want to reiterate that when groups are thinking about it, you got to understand your hydrogen supply, because otherwise it gets restricted. So that's been one of our big challenges. We had to sort of scrape by and get whatever hydrogen we could, and that just increases the price all around from a logistics point of view to the cost of it, and being able to negotiate supply deals for it. So that's one of the huge things that has been a stumbling block. We just got opened our own, it's a liquid to gas facility with an electrolyzer, and it's smoothed out a lot of the supply side. So we feel we're ready for our first heavy duty station, which will be opening up in July out in Delta, by the Delta port. So it's focused on the drayage market. And there's a lot of trucks that obviously go in and out of ports, and they come relatively short distance, so a little bit different than the corridor strategy. So we'll be learning a lot. We've talked to a lot of the fleet operators, trying to understand, as you say, their exact usage. We'll see if it all comes together in a couple of months, as we've got the trucks. They've been parked for a couple of months, or most of them, and we've got the leases all signed up, and we just need to get the hydrogen station going. We'll be able to report back more on the heavy duty side. The light duty has been very good. The vehicles are work great. You get quick fills. They don't really change the range too much in the wintertime, but they don't create a huge fuel demand. So it gets hard to justify fuel supply investments based on the light duty side of things. So when you're thinking about the 5,000 vehicles, I think you have to understand what the makeup of that might be over your 5-year program. It'll be very important to strategize around that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, totally agree on that. Phased approach with certain predefined targets that kind of like justify the investment on supply side, as well as how much the infrastructure can cater to. Yes, totally agree, and I believe that's a part of our corridor strategy to look into that. And we're not, I don't think 100% of the demand would be from corridor to corridor, but also like a mix of hub and spoke for that return to base operations too. So we'll believe we're a couple weeks away from cracking out that actual number on that model, and hopefully we'll be having a webinar to present on that front. Over to Terri, like, more curious about your pilots, and just wanted to know a little more about like those policy options that kind of helped you to get started on this front.
Yeah, we have been incredibly blessed. There's a lot of interest in hydrogen. We've been working with federal organizations. We've received funding from NRCan for an education program where we were doing in training for drivers and also first responders. We've received money for the HTEC project that is directly from Alberta, Emission Reduction Alberta. Through that project, that was kind of what started hydrogen in Alberta. In collaboration with Colin's group here at HTEC, we've got 2 heavy-duty vehicles. If you take a look in the very back corner, you'll see the HTEC truck, and that is one of the only vehicles on the road right now for fuel cell electric vehicles that will haul Canadian weights. So huge bonus there. We've also been supported by Transport Canada through the project we're doing with Deloitte for the zero emission truck test bed, and we've been sponsored for the hydrogen vehicle demonstrations through Prairie Can. And all of these different projects have worked together from federal level, from provincial, even municipal levels to encourage different funding for different projects. Even Edmonton Global has supported us with the mechanic training that we needed to upscale different mechanics that they're able to work on these vehicles here in Canada.
Thank you, Terri. So on that front, like, let's fast forward 5 years. What would success look for like hydrogen mobility in Western Canada?
So for me, I would like to see the codes and standards in place. Right now, we're working mainly with best practices. So codes and standards and gaps there are very important. We're a safety organization, so we're always looking for that safety and then training. I know with the fleets, like you had mentioned, Colin, the fleets need education. They see these vehicles on the road, but they need to understand what they mean not only to the world, but what that means to my operation and to my business organization. So having them understand the benefits and the challenges with those vehicles and where they can fit in. Right now, we really need a lot of new technology. We've had the unfortunate event of Hyzon being pulled out of the market, as well as Nikola. We have 2 Nikola vehicles that are here right now, and we will be operating them. They've been fantastic to work with, so we will continue to operate them. And in Canada, I believe there's Hyundai, who is with us, and Unila. So we need more vehicle OEMs to be bringing their vehicles here for us to be working with. And then as far as Canada, we're always looking for those Canadian weights and Canadian ranges. So a lot of the vehicles that are made in the US are made for US weights, which would be 63,000 pounds. In Canada, we're hauling 140,000 pounds. So we need those vehicles to come up to our Canadian weights, thus the HTEC project. So if you take a look at the truck in the back, that is a truck that's built for 140,000 pounds here in Canada. There's another company that has taken step 2 with the HTEC truck. It's Elemental. They're around here somewhere, and they are doing another built in Canada for Canadian ranges. So that's my long wish list.
Yeah, I totally agree with those. And like I do remember, reminds me of a conversation I had in Prince George with Dr. Greg Halseth, was telling me about the trucks over there mostly, and the wood chipping trucks and the wood logging trucks forming most of their operations and hauling over around 140,000 pounds. That being a challenge in finding out vehicles to haul those kind of weights, even in the other sectors. So Colin, like from where you sit in the value chain, like what signals or options are most important to attract long-term investments in the hydrogen sector? Like,
yeah, going back a little bit, combining your last question on the 5-year. I mean, these investments are 15 to 25-year type of investments. So we need. I don't think we need a 25-year view, but we certainly need a 10-year view. And I was meeting with the Alberta government this morning, just encouraging them to think about the timeframes of everything and how long we need to think about de-risking our investments. These are not paybacks in the typical 2 or 3 years. So we have to understand certainty in that initial phase, and then also what's going to happen in the 5 and 10-year side of things. So I think that's very important. And and we need non-fleeting fleets, right? So I think they're going to be happy if the infrastructure is reliable. So there's a whole level of reliability or redundancy that we need to think through, because that costs money, right? So do you, in the early stages, do you invest in that reliability, which costs money, or do you hold off and work and hold hands of your fleet? So there's a decision to be made there as we think through investment. And we're thinking through that, and it's on all elements. It's on the supply side, it's on the distribution, the fueling station side, and the truck side of things. You just got to work through what you're going to invest in that early stage market. So you do have to believe that it's the strategy we need is about market buildup, and there's all the elements to get there. So it's good to envision where you're going to be, but also working through the steps and thinking about the different time frames for all the different groups and their investments. The training of the people was something that was very important, and I'd say Alberta has a lot of resources in that area. It's very similar skill set that's going to transfer from the gasoline and diesel or natural gas world to the hydrogen world, from technicians that we have to hire and train today. We actually get quite a few from the oil and gas sector. So I think there's a valuable resource there, and just sort of matching that with the fleet operators and drivers. I think it'll be very important. Ultimately, we want to lead to decarbonizing the emissions while still using the resources that are available. So.
Thank you for that. I totally agree with you on many counts on that. And even while looking into the transportation sector, the hydrogen use there, you could see a lot of variables. It's not exactly providing hydrogen from one factory to another to make another petrochemical product in this case, but it's more like there are many locations for fueling stations, there are many fleets, and then the trucking routes fluctuate, and then your infrastructure is at one point, and you got to map them out, and you need that guaranteed regular operation between the routes to actually facilitate a corridor, or those kind of stuff. And in most cases, the options I've seen in Europe on the high trucks consortium side of things, or they're individual players who come in, and the consortiums have been built over there. And I see HTEC here, you guys basically do everything, from refueling, from the hydrogen production, to even the vehicle leasing entity, which is very innovative. And that's one of those key things that we are also seeing in the global pilots, where the fleets don't actually want to be doing grant applications and stuff like that, but now that's sorted out for them through leasing the vehicle. And given the high cost right now to purchase one, it seems like a pretty good option on that front too. So.
Yeah, I mean, it was a little bit because there wasn't anybody else doing it, so I have to kind of keep that in mind. But I think, one of the other elements of this strategy, I think, has to think about the small and the big. So a couple points on that. One is, I think you want to make sure you promote some of the technology development early stage. So think about a bit of a platform to allow those to mature and demonstrate and evolve the technologies, because you definitely want that ecosystem of, as Terri mentioned, we do need some technology to evolve in this area, and that's on the production station and the vehicle side of things. But then you want also the bigger players to be involved, and it gets very hard. We ran into problems with, I laugh at our hydrogen purification that we built for AMTA. You go to Suncor refinery and there's a 60-foot tall wall of pipes and valves and structures, and we have a 1-inch line of hydrogen coming out to it, right? So it's just, when you look at it, you can see the challenges of the maintenance crew has to deal with this mammoth wall, and then they're supposed to think about our little hydrogen production facility and make it a similar priority. So when you think about engaging the big companies, you have to somehow figure out your strategy for that, as well as your the entrepreneurs and the technology and the early adopters. So no easy task, but I think knowing and looking at what's happened, as you said, in the different other communities around the world, you'll see the importance of both.
Yes, thank you for that, Colin. And I think we can open up to the audience for any questions.
I have a question from the online audience. So as we scale up hydrogen mobility, what opportunities do you see to expand the local value chain, whether it's in vehicle deployment, infrastructure, services, or workforce development?
Terri, you want?
There are multiple. I'm taking a look at training. There's developing safety codes. There's developing standards. There's developing training for our youth that are coming in with the NATES and the SATES and the old colleges. The University of Alberta is doing different things with us as far as data. There's mechanic bays. We have to train our mechanics. We have to actually build mechanic bays. So there's an infrastructure development. These are all using current skills and tasks that we're having, but upskilling them and taking these positions that currently exist and bringing them to the next level. Even the production, to some extent, is taking a look. Hydrogen production, it's building off of other things that we know. A lot of individuals that are coming into hydrogen and production were used to being oil and gas, but Colin, you can probably talk on the other skills that you're developing and building too.
Yeah, I think there's lots, and so the question is there opportunities? Yeah, and I think they're across the whole broad array, from the supply to the production to the engineering, the codes and standards, and even on the whole financing. Right, we have to get the financing community engaged in this, and Alberta in the oil and gas sector is well versed in how you project finance and make the we've ultimately got to make hydrogen infrastructure an asset class. So that means maturing everything as has happened in the all young industries go through this development stage till they're investable, and that's when you can truly scale up. So one of the challenges we have when I joke about fleeting fleets is we can't get a guaranteed offtake on the fuel side, right? It just doesn't really exist, and they haven't even tried a truck yet. So you got to get them over that hurdle. You got to get them to integrate with their clients. So there's a huge opportunity to work through all that. So I encourage companies to talk about it, and that's obviously what this is for. But yeah. To your questioner online, I heard there's thousands of people online, so any more questions would be good. But yeah, think about the opportunities; they definitely exist.
Thank you. And since you mentioned offtakes and fuel, Arvind, on your experience from the development of the TCO, what should be the price of hydrogen, ideally?
There are three key factors there impacting the total cost of ownership. And one is the price of the truck. The price of the truck is still north of $800,000 today, so that's expensive. That absolutely has to come down. Price of hydrogen varies by jurisdiction and the purity and the carbon intensity of how it's produced. And I think there is still, we are seeing production coming in still competitive, but how do you move hydrogen to where it's needed? I think there is still huge costs by the time you get moved. And then the last one, which not many people think about, but it's a critical one, is insurance costs. Insurance costs are not cheap on these trucks. They're pretty substantial. So all in all, I would say not just one price alone, but some of these key factors will have to come together. And if you want to pin down to a price, we're going to say that it'll be, to bring it to parity along with other factors, we should start seeing prices around in the $7 to $8 a kilogram range delivered to the truck. That's when we're going to start seeing at least some more momentum. But again, distribution of hydrogen is key there.
I want to hop in on one thing you said there, Arvind. You had said the insurance of the cost. So as soon as people think that, they think that there's a higher risk with a hydrogen vehicles with insurance, but that's not actually it. If you're taking a look at a diesel truck, you're paying maybe $230,000. If you're taking a look at a hydrogen truck, you're paying for $600,000. So now your asset has increased in value. It's kind of like buying a regular car versus a high-end sports car. Your cost is increased, and therefore your insurance is also increasing. So it's not a risk thing.
Any more questions from the audience? Okay, then I guess we can wrap up. Thank you to our panelists for joining us on stage, as well as all those in the audience and the ones online. We'll return at 1 p.m. for our next session on connecting hubs to decarbonize Western Canada at the Edmonton Global Stage, and hope you can join us for that too. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mohamed.